Hey guys, me again. Sorry about that. I got interrupted by a student. You know how insanely popular I am. We're on the top of 191, and remember, we're still looking for that word play, the spells, and even people's names and things like that. Just pay close attention. They moved through the crowd, matching up partners. Lockhart teamed Neville and Justin Finch-Fletchley, but Snape reached Harry and Ron first. "Time to split up the dream team, I think," he sneered. "Weasley, you can partner Finnegan. Potter." Harry moved automatically toward Hermione. "I don't think so," said Snape, smiling coldly. "Mr. Malfoy, come over here. Let's see what you can make of the famous Potter. And you, Miss Granger, you can partner Miss Bulstrode." Malfoy strutted over, smirking. Behind him walked a Slytherin girl who reminded Harry of a picture he'd seen in Holidays with Hags. She was large and square, and her heavy jaw jutted aggressively. Hermione gave her a weak smile that she did not return. "Face your partners," called Lockhart back on the platform, "and bow." Harry and Malfoy barely inclined their heads, not taking their eyes off each other. "Wands at the ready," shouted Lockhart. "When I count to 3, cast your charms to disarm your opponents. Only to disarm them. We don't want any accidents. 1, 2, 3. Harry swung his wand high, but Malfoy had already started on 2. His spell hit Harry so hard he felt as though he'd been hit over the head with a saucepan. He stumbled, but everything still seemed to be working, and wasting no more time, Harry pointed his wand straight at Malfoy and shouted, "Rictum Sempra!" A jet of silver light hit Malfoy in the stomach, and he doubled up, wheezing. "I said disarm only!" Lockhart shouted in alarm over the heads of the battling crowd as Malfoy sank to his knees. Harry had hit him with a tickling charm, and he could barely move for laughing. Harry hung back with a vague feeling it would be unsporting to bewitch Malfoy while he was on the floor, but this was a mistake. Gasping for breath, Malfoy pointed his wand at Harry's knees, choked, "Tarantallegra!" And the next second, Harry's legs began to jerk around out of his control in a kind of quick step. "Stop! Stop!" screamed Lockhart, but Snape took charge. "Finite incantatum!" he shouted. Harry's feet stopped dancing. Malfoy stopped laughing, and they were able to look up. A haze of greenish smoke was hovering over the scene. Both Neville and Justin were lying on the floor panting. Ron was holding up an ashen-faced Seamus, apologizing for whatever his broken wand had done. But Hermione and Millicent Bulstrode were still moving. Millicent had Hermione in a headlock, and Hermione was whimpering in pain. Both their wands lay forgotten on the floor. Harry leapt forward and pulled Millicent off. It was difficult. She was a lot bigger than he was. "Dear, dear," said Lockhart, skittering through the crowd, looking at the aftermath of the duels. "Up you go, Macmillan. Careful there, Miss Fawcett. Pinch it hard. It'll stop bleeding in a second, Boot." "I think I'd better teach you how to block unfriendly spells," said Lockhart, standing flustered in the midst of the hall. He glanced at Snape, whose black eyes glinted, and looked quickly away. "Let's have a volunteer pair. Longbottom and Finch-Fletchley. How about you?" "A bad idea, Professor Lockhart," said Snape, gliding over like a large and malevolent bat. "Longbottom causes devastation with the simplest smells. We'll be sending what's left of Finch-Fletchley up to the hospital wing in a matchbox." Neville's round pink face went pinker. "How about Malfoy and Potter?" said Snape with a twisted smile. "Excellent idea!" said Lockhart, gesturing Harry and Malfoy into the middle of the hall as the crowd backed away to give them room. "Now, Harry," said Lockhart, "when Draco points his wand at you, you do this." He raised his own wand, attempted a complicated sort of wiggling action, and dropped it. Snape smirked as Lockhart quickly picked it up, saying, "Whoops, my wand is a little overexcited." Snape moved closer to Malfoy, bent down and whispered something in his ear. Malfoy smirked too. Harry looked up nervously at Lockhart and said, "Professor, could you show me that blocking thing again?" "Scared?" muttered Malfoy so that Lockhart couldn't hear him. "You wish," said Harry out of the corner of his mouth. Lockhart cuffed Harry merrily on the shoulder. "Just do what I did, Harry!" "What? Drop my wand?" But Lockhart wasn't listening. 3, 2, 1, go! He shouted. Malfoy raised his wand quickly and bellowed, "Serpensortia!" The end of his wand exploded. Harry watched, aghast, as a long black snake shot out of it, fell heavily onto the floor between them, and raised itself, ready to strike. There were screams as the crowd backed swiftly away, clearing the floor. "Don't move, Potter," said Snape lazily, clearly enjoying the sight of Harry standing motionless, eye to eye with the angry snake. "I'll get rid of it." "Oh, allow me!" shouted Lockhart. He brandished his wand at the snake, and there was a loud bang. The snake, instead of vanishing, flew 10 feet into the air and fell back to the floor with a loud smack. Enraged and hissing furiously, it slithered straight toward Justin Fletchley, raised itself again, fangs exposed, poised to strike. Harry wasn't sure what made him do it. He wasn't even aware of deciding to do it. All he knew was that his legs were carrying him forward as though he was on casters, and that he'd shouted stupidly at the snake, "Leave him alone!" And miraculously, inexplicably, the snake slumped to the floor, docile as a thick black garden hose, its eyes now on Harry. Harry felt the fear drain out of him. He knew the snake wouldn't attack anyone now, though how he knew it, he couldn't have explained it. He looked up at Justin, grinning, expecting to see Justin looking relieved or puzzled or even grateful, but certainly not angry and scared. "What do you think you're playing at?" he shouted, and before Harry could say anything, Justin had turned and stormed out of the hall. Snape stepped forward, waved his wand, and the snake vanished in a small puff of black smoke. Snape, too, was looking at Harry in an unexpected way. It was a shrewd and calculating look, and Harry didn't like it. He was also dimly aware of an ominous muttering all around the walls. Then he felt a tugging at the back of his robes. "Come on," said Ron's voice in his ear. "Move. Come on." Ron steered him out of the hall, Hermione hurrying alongside them. As they went through the doors, the people on either side drew away as though they were frightened of catching something. Harry didn't have a clue what was going on, and neither Ron nor Hermione explained anything, until they dragged him all the way up to the empty Gryffindor common room. Then Ron pushed Harry into an armchair and said, "You're a parcel mouth! Why didn't you tell us?" "I'm a what?" said Harry. "A parcel mouth," said Ron. "You can talk to snakes." "I know," said Harry. "I mean, that's only the second time I've ever done it. I accidentally set a boa constrictor on my cousin Dudley at the zoo once. Long story. But it was telling me it had never seen Brazil, and I sort of set it free without meaning to. That was before I knew I was a wizard." "A boa constrictor told you had never seen Brazil," Ron repeated faintly. "So?" said Harry. "I bet loads of people here can do it." "Oh, no, they can't," said Ron. "It's not a very common gift. Harry, this is bad." "What's bad?" said Harry, starting to feel quite angry. "What's wrong with everyone? Listen, if I hadn't told that snake not to attack Justin—" "Oh, that's what you said to it. What do you mean? You were there. You heard me." "I heard you speaking parcel tongue," said Ron. "Snake language. You could have been saying anything. No wonder Justin panicked. You sounded like you were egging the snake on or something. It was creepy, you know." Harry gaped at him. "I spoke a different language? But I didn't realize. How can I speak a language without knowing I can speak it?" Ron shook his head. Both he and Hermione were looking as though someone had died. Harry couldn't see what was so terrible. "Do you want to tell me what's wrong with stopping a massive snake biting off Justin's head?" he said. "What does it matter how I did it, as long as Justin doesn't have to join the headless hunt?" "It matters," said Hermione, speaking at last in a hushed voice, "because being able to talk to snakes was what Salazar Slytherin was famous for. That's why the symbol of Slytherin House is a serpent." Harry's mouth fell open. "Exactly," said Ron. "And now the whole school's going to think you're his great-great-great-great-grandson or something." "But I'm not," said Harry with a panic he couldn't quite explain. "You'll find that hard to prove," said Hermione. "He lived about 1,000 years ago. For all we know, you could be." Harry lay awake for hours that night. Through a gap in the curtains around his four-poster, he watched snow starting to drift past the tower window and wondered, could he be a descendant of Salazar Slytherin? He didn't know anything about his father's family, after all. The Dursleys had always forbidden questions about his wizarding relatives. Quietly, Harry tried to say something in parcel tongue. The words wouldn't come. It seemed he had to be face to face with the snake to do it. But I'm in Gryffindor, Harry thought. The Sorting Hat wouldn't have put me here if I had Slytherin blood. Ah, said a nasty little voice in his brain. But the Sorting Hat wanted to put you in Slytherin. Don't you remember? Harry turned over. He'd see Justin the next day in herbology, and he'd explain that he'd been calling the snake off, not egging it on, which, he thought angrily, pummeling his pillow, any fool should have realized.